The chilling crack of the whip against the wooden post beside Olivia Caldwell's ear made her flinch, but she refused to cry. Defiance was all she had left after 3 weeks of captivity at Crook Valley Ranch, and she wouldn't give Joseph Blackburn the satisfaction of seeing her break, not when the cruel ranch owner had already taken everything else from her. Montana Territory, 1878. The spring had come early, bringing with it the smell of new grass and wildflowers to the rolling plains. But Olivia could only smell the dank scent of the stable where Blackburn kept her during the day, tied to a support beam while she worked sorting tack and mending harnesses until her fingers bled. At night, she was locked in a small storage room attached to the main house, with only a thin blanket and a bucket of water. "Work faster," Blackburn growled, circling her like a predator. His salt and pepper beard couldn't hide the cruelty in his smile. "Those saddles won't clean themselves, and the boys need them by noon." "Yes, sir," Olivia murmured, keeping her eyes down as she scrubbed harder at the weathered leather. The rope around her wrists had been loosened just enough for her to work, but still chafed against the raw skin beneath. At 22, Olivia had never imagined her life would come to this. After her father's death 6 months ago, she discovered his ranch was deeply in debt to Blackburn. The older man had offered her a position as housekeeper to work off what was owed, but his true intentions became clear when he'd locked her away, claiming she was trying to steal from him. Now she was little more than a slave, with no one in these parts to help her. "You're lucky I'm a merciful man," Blackburn said, reaching to touch her auburn hair. "Most would have turned you in for theft. Instead, I'm giving you a chance to earn your way back to respectability." Olivia pulled away from his touch as subtly as she could. "My father never owed you what you claim, Mr. Blackburn." The blow came quickly, a backhand that sent her sprawling across the dirt floor. "Your father was a fool who didn't know how to run a ranch, just like his daughter doesn't know when to keep her mouth shut." Blackburn straightened his vest. "No supper tonight. Maybe hunger will teach you some respect." As he stalked away, Olivia touched her stinging cheek and fought back tears. Her father had been many things: stubborn, quick-tempered, but never a fool. She knew Blackburn had forged the debt papers, but with no family and no money for a lawyer, she had no way to prove it. The stable door creaked open again, and Olivia tensed, expecting Blackburn's return. Instead, a different silhouette appeared, taller, leaner, backlit by the midday sun. "Mr. Blackburn wants the chestnut saddled for the afternoon ride," a deep voice announced. Olivia recognized him as one of the new hands hired on for the spring cattle drive. He'd arrived just last week, and she'd only glimpsed him from a distance, tall with broad shoulders and a way of walking that suggested he wasn't to be trifled with. "Xavier Zimmerman," she'd heard the others call him. "Yes, sir," she answered automatically, struggling to her feet despite the rope that bound her to the post. Xavier stepped fully into the stable, and in the filtered light, Olivia could see him clearly for the first time. He wore the dust of the trail on his clothes, faded denim pants, a chambray shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing muscled forearms. His dark hat was pulled low, but she could see the strong line of his jaw, shadowed with stubble, and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Those eyes widened slightly when they landed on the rope around her wrists. "What's this?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet as he moved closer. "Mr. Blackburn's orders," Olivia said, turning away to reach for the chestnut saddle. She didn't want his pity. Pity wouldn't free her. But Xavier didn't move toward the horse. Instead, he crouched down to examine the rope that tethered her to the post. "How long has he kept you like this?" The genuine concern in his voice made something crack inside her, a tiny fissure in the wall she'd built to keep herself from breaking down. 3 weeks, she whispered, then straightened her spine. "It's nothing I can't handle." Xavier stood slowly, and she noticed he moved like a man accustomed to dangerous situations, balanced, ready. "No one should be handled this way, miss." Before she could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps made them both freeze. Xavier quickly moved to the chestnut's stall, pretending to examine the animal as one of Blackburn's most loyal hands, Tim Miller, appeared at the stable entrance. "Zimmerman, boss wants to see you about the north pasture fence," Miller called out, eyeing Olivia with the same disdain he always showed her. "I'll be right there," Xavier answered easily, though Olivia noted how his hand had instinctively moved to rest near the holstered revolver at his hip. When Miller left, Xavier turned back to her. "What's your name, Olivia?" "Olivia Caldwell." "Miss Caldwell," he said, tipping his hat slightly, "I'd be obliged if you'd have that chestnut ready in an hour." Something in the way he emphasized the time frame made her look up sharply. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Olivia felt the first spark of hope she'd experienced in weeks. "1 hour," he repeated meaningfully, then strode out of the stable. For the next 60 minutes, Olivia worked with renewed energy, her mind racing. Was he planning something, or had she imagined the significance in his words? She saddled the chestnut as requested, then returned to cleaning tack, all while counting the minutes. At precisely the 1 hour mark, the stable door opened again. Xavier entered, followed by 2 other ranch hands who engaged in loud conversation about the upcoming cattle drive. While they examined the horses in the far stalls, Xavier approached Olivia. "Stand up," he murmured, his back to the others. "When I move to check the chestnut's saddle, I want you to slip outside and wait behind the woodpile. Can you do that?" Olivia's heart hammered in her chest. "Yes," she whispered, but the rope in one swift motion, Xavier produced a knife from his boot and sliced through her bonds. "Count to 20, then go. Don't run until you're out of sight of the main house." Before she could thank him, he raised his voice. "This saddle isn't secured properly." He moved to the chestnut's stall, drawing the attention of the other hands. "Come look at this cinch. It would have given way before Blackburn made it a mile." While the men gathered around the horse, Olivia silently counted to 20. When they were all engaged in examining the saddle, she slipped out the side door, her legs trembling with fear and excitement. The afternoon sun momentarily blinded her, but she kept moving, staying low and close to the building until she reached the woodpile. Hidden from view, she waited, massaging her raw wrists and trying to quiet her breathing. Minutes passed. The shadows lengthened. Had something gone wrong? Had Xavier been caught helping her? The thought of him facing Blackburn's wrath because of her made her stomach clench. Just as she was considering whether to risk looking around the woodpile, she heard soft footsteps approaching. She tensed, ready to run. "Miss Caldwell." Xavier's voice was barely audible. "Here," she breathed. He appeared beside her, leading a dappled gray mare already saddled and bridled. He handed her a small bundle. "Provisions," he explained. "Not much, but enough to get you to Mill Creek. There's a woman there, Martha Wilson, who runs a boarding house. Tell her Zav sent you." Olivia took the bundle, overwhelmed. "Why are you helping me?" Xavier's expression hardened. "I've seen men like Blackburn before. What he's doing isn't just wrong, it's criminal. Now we need to move." The men are distracted with a broken fence line to the east, but Blackburn will be back from town by dusk. He helped her mount the mare, his hands strong and sure at her waist. Once she was settled, he handed her the reins. "Follow the creek south for 5 miles, then cut west when you reach the Split Oak. It'll take you to the main road to Mill Creek. Stay off open trails until you're well away from here." Olivia looked down at him, this stranger who was risking everything to help her. "What about you?" "When Blackburn discovers I'm gone, I'll claim the horse spooked and ran off. I was hired to mend fences and wrangle cattle, not keep track of skittish mares. A small smile touched his lips. Don't worry about me, Miss Caldwell. I can handle Joseph Blackburn. Thank you, she whispered, meaning it more than she'd ever meant anything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Live free, he answered simply. That's payment enough. He stepped back and slapped the mare's flank gently. Now ride and don't look back. Olivia guided the horse away from the ranch, keeping to the tree line that bordered the property. Her heart pounded with fear and exhilaration as she urged the mare into a trot once they were out of sight of the buildings. Freedom. The word tasted sweet on her tongue as the wind whipped through her hair. For the first time in weeks, she could breathe without the weight of dread pressing down on her chest. But as the ranch disappeared behind her, one thought remained. The image of Xavier Zimmerman standing tall in the stable doorway, the man who had cut her ropes and led her into freedom. The mare beneath Olivia moved with an easy grace, carrying her farther from captivity with each passing minute. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Montana countryside, painting the hills gold and the valleys deep purple. Under different circumstances, she might have found the landscape beautiful. Now, she could only focus on the path ahead, constantly glancing over her shoulder for any sign of pursuit. Though Xavier's plan had seemed sound, she knew Blackburn would not let her go easily. She represented too much the deed to her father's land, free labor, and the satisfaction of breaking someone's spirit. Following Xavier's instructions, she kept close to the creek, its burbling waters masking the sound of hoofbeats. The cool air carried the scent of pine and new grass, reminding her of spring afternoons spent riding the boundaries of her father's modest ranch before illness had claimed him, before Blackburn had claimed her. Her thoughts circled back to Xavier. Who was this cowboy who had risked his position to free her? Men like him were rare in these parts. Most drifters looking for ranch work kept their heads down and ignored the ugliness they encountered, focusing only on their next pay. As the light began to fade, Olivia reached the split oak Xavier had mentioned, a massive tree cleaved by lightning years ago, yet still thriving with two distinct trunks reaching skyward. She turned west as instructed, guiding the mare up a gentle slope that would eventually lead to the main road to Mill Creek. Just as the first stars appeared in the eastern sky, Olivia heard the distant thunder of hooves. Her blood turned to ice. Someone was coming and they were riding hard. Panic seized her. There was no cover here on the open hillside, nowhere to hide. If she rode faster, the noise might give her away in the stillness of approaching night. If she remained at her current pace, they would surely overtake her. Making a split-second decision, Olivia guided the mare off the trail and down into a shallow ravine. She dismounted quickly, leading the horse into a stand of junipers. With trembling hands, she tied the reins to a branch and pressed herself against the mare's warm flank, hoping the gray coat wouldn't catch the moonlight. The riders drew closer. She could distinguish at least 3 horses now. Their pace slowed as they reached the area where she'd left the trail, and her heart hammered so loudly she feared they might hear it. "Tracks lead down this way." A voice called out, one she recognized as Tim Miller's. "Spread out," another voice ordered. "She can't have gone far." Not Blackburn's voice, she noted with slight relief, but that of his foreman, Silas Ridd, a man nearly as cruel as his employer. Olivia held her breath as the sounds of horses moving through brush came closer to her hiding spot. The mare beneath her hand shifted nervously, sensing her fear. She stroked the animal's neck, silently pleading for it to remain quiet. "Miller, check that ravine," Reed shouted. Hoofbeats approached her hiding place. In desperation, Olivia grabbed a stone and flung it as far as she could in the opposite direction. The small noise of it landing among dried leaves was enough. Miller's horse turned toward the sound. "Something's moving over there," he called out. The riders converged away from her position, giving Olivia precious seconds. Making a decision that went against everything Xavier had told her, she mounted the mare and urged it up the far side of the ravine, away from both the trail and her pursuers. The horse responded beautifully, climbing the steep slope with sure footing. Once at the top, Olivia pressed forward into a stand of pine trees, moving as quietly as possible while putting distance between herself and Blackburn's men. She rode through the darkness for hours, guided only by occasional glimpses of stars between the trees. When the mare began to stumble with fatigue, Olivia knew they needed rest. Finding a small clearing sheltered by pines, she dismounted and led the tired horse to a patch of grass. From Xavier's bundle, she took a small piece of jerky and a flask of water. The food was tasteless in her dry mouth, but she forced herself to eat, knowing she needed strength. After watering the mare from her cupped hands, Olivia settled at the base of a tree, pulling her thin jacket tightly around her against the mountain night's chill. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by every snapping twig and rustling leaf. Dreams of rope burns and Blackburn's mocking laughter mingled with visions of Xavier's steady gaze as he cut her bonds. Dawn broke with pearlescent light filtering through the pines. Olivia rose stiffly, her body aching from the hard ground and the previous day's ride. After a quick breakfast of the last piece of jerky, she mounted the mare and set off again, hoping to find the main road. By mid-morning, she spotted a rutted dirt track winding through the valley below. She approached cautiously, scanning in both directions before guiding the mare onto the road. According to Xavier, Mill Creek should be less than half a day's ride from here. The sun climbed higher, bringing warmth that eased some of the stiffness from her muscles. Olivia allowed herself to relax marginally, thinking perhaps she'd successfully evaded Blackburn's men. The road curved around a hill covered in wildflowers, and for the first time since her escape, a small smile touched her lips at the simple beauty. It disappeared instantly when she rounded the bend and saw 3 riders approaching from the direction of Mill Creek. Her first instinct was to flee, but something made her hesitate. These weren't Blackburn's men. Their horses and clothes were different, their postures more relaxed. Still, strangers could mean danger for a woman alone. With no time to leave the road without being seen, Olivia pulled her hat low and continued forward, hoping to pass the group without incident. As they drew closer, one of the riders, a woman in a practical riding skirt, raised a hand in greeting. "Good day to you, traveler." Surprised to see a female among the group, Olivia returned the greeting cautiously. "Good day." The woman guided her horse alongside Olivia's. She appeared to be in her 40s, with kind eyes and graying hair pinned beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "I'm Martha Wilson," she said. "You look like you've been on the trail a while." Olivia nearly fell from her saddle in shock. "Martha Wilson, from Mill Creek?" The woman's eyebrows rose. "That's right. Do I know you, miss?" "No, madam, but I was told to find you." Olivia swallowed hard. "A man named Xavier Zimmerman sent me." "Zav, he said you'd know him." Martha's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. She gestured to her companions, an older man with a silver mustache and a younger man who bore a strong resemblance to Martha. "These are my brother Henry and my son William." "You can speak freely." Hesitantly at first, then with increasing urgency, Olivia related the events of the past weeks: her father's death, Blackburn's false debt claim, her captivity, and Xavier's role in her escape. Martha's face darkened as she listened. When Olivia finished, The older woman exchanged meaningful looks with her brother and son. "Joseph Blackburn has terrorized this territory long enough," Martha said grimly. "He's used similar tactics before, claiming debts where none exist, forcing people off their land. The territorial marshal has been building a case against him, but without witnesses willing to testify." "I'll testify," Olivia said firmly, "if it means stopping him from doing this to someone else." Martha nodded approvingly. "That's brave of you, Miss Caldwell. But first, let's get you safely to town. You look exhausted, and that mare could use rest and water." As they continued toward Mill Creek, Martha rode beside Olivia. "This Xavier Zimmerman," she said thoughtfully. "Tall fellow, dark hair, scar along his right forearm." "Yes, that's him," Olivia confirmed, surprised. "Do you know him well?" Martha's smile held secrets. "He helped my family once, years ago. Seems he's still in the business of helping those who need it most." "Did he mention why he's working for Blackburn?" "No," Olivia admitted. "We didn't have much time to talk." Was Martha's only response, but something in her tone suggested she knew more than she was saying. By late afternoon, they reached Mill Creek, a small but thriving town nestled in a valley. Compared to the isolation of Blackburn's ranch, it seemed like a bustling metropolis to Olivia, with its main street lined with businesses, a church spire rising above the rooftops, and people going about their daily routines. Martha led their group to a large two-story building set back from the street with a well-tended garden and wide front porch. A painted sign declared it Wilson's Boarding House. "This is my place," Martha said as they dismounted. "You'll be safe here, Olivia. We'll get you cleaned up, fed, and rested. Then we can discuss what to do about Joseph Blackburn." As William led the horses to a stable behind the house, Martha guided Olivia inside. The boarding house was warm and inviting, with polished wood floors, comfortable furnishings, and the smell of fresh bread in the air. "Emma," Martha called. A young woman appeared from what Olivia assumed was the kitchen. "This is Miss Olivia Caldwell. She'll be staying with us. Please prepare the blue room and draw a bath." "Yes, Mrs. Wilson," Emma replied, giving Olivia a curious but friendly glance before hurrying upstairs. Martha turned to Olivia. "Henry and I are going to visit Marshal Collins. I think he should hear your story as soon as possible. Will you be all right here for a while?" "Yes, thank you," Olivia said, suddenly overwhelmed by the kindness of these strangers. "I don't know how to repay your hospitality." Martha patted her hand. "Any friend of Xavier Zimmerman's is welcome in my home. Besides," she added with a hint of steel in her voice, "I've been waiting for a chance to see Joseph Blackburn face justice for a very long time." After Martha and Henry departed, Emma showed Olivia to a modest but clean bedroom with a real bed, a luxury after weeks of sleeping on the stable floor or in the cramped storage room. The promised bath awaited in an adjoining room, steam rising invitingly from the copper tub. "Mrs. Wilson said to provide you with clean clothes," Emma explained, placing a folded bundle on the bed. "These belonged to her daughter before she married and moved to Helena. They should fit well enough." Left alone, Olivia sank into the hot water with a sigh that came from her very soul. As she scrubbed away the dirt of captivity and escape, tears began to flow, tears of relief, exhaustion, and lingering fear. What if Blackburn found her here? What if Xavier was punished for helping her? And beneath those worries, a deeper question formed. Would she ever see him again, the quiet cowboy with steady hands who had given her back her freedom? Clean, dressed in borrowed clothes that felt remarkably fine against her skin, and with her hair brushed and braided, Olivia made her way downstairs. She found William in the dining room, setting the table for the evening meal. "Feeling better, Miss Caldwell?" he asked with a friendly smile. "Much better, thank you," she replied, "though I feel I should be helping rather than being waited upon." William chuckled. "Mother would have my hide if I put a guest to work on her first day, but if you're staying a while, I'm sure she'll find plenty for you to do. She believes idle hands lead to melancholy thoughts." Before Olivia could respond, the front door opened, and Martha returned with her brother and another man tall and broad-shouldered, with a silver star pinned to his vest. "Miss Caldwell," Martha said, "this is Marshal Ethan Collins. He'd like to hear your account of what happened at Blackburn's ranch." Over supper, Olivia recounted her ordeal again, this time in greater detail for the marshal's benefit. Collins listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions but never doubting her story. "This matches complaints I've heard before," he said when she finished. "Blackburn's been careful to target people without family connections or the means to fight back legally, but with your testimony and the evidence of your treatment." He gestured to her wrists, still raw from the ropes despite Martha's salve. "What happens now?" Olivia asked. "I'll send telegrams to the territorial judge and the federal marshal in Helena," Collins explained. "With your statement and others we've gathered, we should have enough for an arrest warrant. In the meantime, you'll stay here where it's safe." "And what about Xavier Zimmerman?" she couldn't help asking. "Will he be in danger when Blackburn realizes he helped me?" A look passed between Martha and the marshal that Olivia couldn't quite interpret. "I wouldn't worry too much about Mr. Zimmerman," Collins said carefully. "He can take care of himself." That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in weeks, Olivia found sleep elusive despite her exhaustion. Her mind kept returning to Xavier, the gentleness in his hands as he helped her mount, the determination in his eyes as he sliced through her bonds, the quiet strength in his voice as he told her to live free. She wondered if she would ever have the chance to thank him properly. 3 days passed in the relative safety of Mill Creek. Olivia found herself welcomed not just by the Wilsons, but by many in the small community. News of her escape from Blackburn spread quickly, and it seemed the rancher had few friends among the townspeople. On her 4th morning at the boarding house, Olivia was helping Emma in the kitchen when they heard the sound of multiple horses arriving. Peering through the window, she saw Marshal Collins dismounting, accompanied by several armed men. Martha hurried out to meet them, and through the open door, Olivia heard the marshal's announcement. "We've got the warrant for Blackburn's arrest. We're riding out within the hour." Olivia's hands trembled as she set down the mixing bowl she'd been holding. This was the beginning of justice for what had been done to her and, she suspected, to others before her. Martha entered the kitchen, her expression serious. "Marshal Collins would like you to stay here while they make the arrest. Once Blackburn is in custody, they may need you to identify some of your belongings at the ranch." "Of course," Olivia agreed, though part of her wanted to ride with them to see Blackburn's face when justice finally caught up to him. The wait was excruciating. Olivia tried to keep busy helping with chores around the boarding house, but her mind continually drifted to what might be happening at Crook Valley Ranch. What if Blackburn resisted? What if innocent ranch hands were caught in the crossfire? What if Xavier was there when the marshal arrived? It was nearly sunset when they heard riders returning. Olivia rushed to the front window to see Marshal Collins leading his men back into town. In the center of the group, his hands bound before him, rode Joseph Blackburn. Even from a distance, Olivia could see the fury in the rancher's face. His clothes were disheveled, and a dark bruise was forming on his cheek. Behind him rode several of his men, similarly bound. The sight of her former captor in chains should have brought Olivia satisfaction, but instead, a cold fear gripped her. This was real. She would have to testify against him, to face him in court and recount her ordeal for strangers to judge, and somewhere in the back of her mind, A small voice whispered, "What if he escapes? What if he comes for you?" Martha came to stand beside her at the window. "It's over, Olivia. He can't hurt you anymore." "Did anyone get hurt in the arrest?" Olivia asked, scanning the returning group for any sign of Xavier. "No serious injuries," Martha assured her. "Blackburn tried to run, but they caught him before he got far. Most of his men surrendered without a fight once they realized what was happening." "And the other ranch hands, the ones who weren't involved in what he did to me?" Martha seemed to understand the question beneath her words. "The marshal left a few deputies at the ranch to keep things running until the territorial court decides what to do with the property. The hands who weren't arrested can stay on if they wish." Olivia nodded, still searching the faces of the returning men. "Did you hear anything about Xavier Zimmerman?" A small smile played at the corners of Martha's mouth. "Funny you should ask. The marshal mentioned that Zimmerman wasn't at the ranch when they arrived. Apparently, he'd left yesterday on some errand for Blackburn and hadn't returned." Before Olivia could process this information, there was a knock at the front door. William opened it to reveal Marshal Collins, looking tired but satisfied. "Miss Caldwell," he said, removing his hat. "I thought you'd want to know that Joseph Blackburn is safely locked in our jail. The judge should arrive from Helena within the week for a preliminary hearing." "Thank you, Marshal," Olivia said. "What happens now? Tomorrow, if you're willing, I'd like you to accompany me to the ranch to identify your personal belongings. We found some items in Blackburn's office that may belong to your father, deeds, letters, that sort of thing." The thought of returning to Crook Valley sent a shiver down Olivia's spine, but she straightened her shoulders. "I'll be ready whenever you need me." After the marshal left, Martha insisted Olivia eat a proper supper, though she had little appetite. Later, as she prepared for bed, Olivia found herself drawn to the window, staring out at the night sky filled with stars. Somewhere out there was Xavier Zimmerman, the man who had saved her with a knife and a quiet word. She whispered a prayer for his safety into the darkness. Morning brought clear skies and a cool breeze as Olivia rode beside Marshal Collins toward Crook Valley Ranch. 2 deputies accompanied them, alert for any trouble though they expected none. As they crested the final hill and the ranch buildings came into view, Olivia felt her chest tighten. The place of her captivity looked deceptively peaceful in the morning light, a cluster of well-maintained structures surrounded by corrals and outbuildings, with cattle grazing on distant hillsides. "You all right, Miss Caldwell?" Collins asked, noticing her tension. "Yes," she said firmly. "Just memories." He nodded in understanding. "We'll make this quick. My men have gathered what we believe are personal effects that might belong to you or your father, there in the main house." As they rode into the ranch yard, several cowboys stopped their work to watch. Olivia recognized a few of the men who had seen her bound in the stable day after day and done nothing. Some looked away in shame as she passed. Others stared defiantly. Collins led her to the main house, a structure she had only glimpsed from afar during her captivity. Inside, it was surprisingly well appointed, with polished furniture and expensive rugs, the home of a man who'd built his fortune on the backs of others. In the study, several boxes had been prepared. "These papers were in Blackburn's safe," Collins explained, showing her a stack of documents. "Some appear to be deeds to properties in the area, including what might be your father's ranch." Olivia examined the papers carefully, her heart racing when she found her father's familiar signature on several documents. "These are ours," she confirmed. "This is the original deed to our homestead. And these letters there from my mother before she died." Relief washed over her. With these papers, she might be able to reclaim her family's land, to rebuild what Blackburn had tried to take from her. As they continued through the documents, Olivia noticed something odd, a contract with her father's signature that seemed different from the others. Looking closer, she realized the truth. "This is the loan agreement Blackburn claimed my father signed," she said, pointing to the document. "But this isn't his handwriting. I'd know it anywhere. He always made his C with a particular flourish. This is a forgery." Collins examined the document with interest. "This could be important evidence for the judge. May I keep this with the other case materials?" "Of course," Olivia agreed. "Anything that helps prove what kind of man he truly is." After gathering her few personal belongings, a silver locket that had been her mother's, some clothing, and a small Bible, they prepared to leave. As Collins helped her mount her horse, a commotion near the bunkhouse caught their attention. Two men were arguing heatedly, their voices carrying across the yard. One was Tim Miller, Blackburn's loyal hand. The other was a ranch worker Olivia didn't recognize. "What's going on there?" Collins asked one of his deputies. "Miller's been causing trouble since we arrived," the deputy explained. "Keeps saying Blackburn was framed, that the girl ran off on her own, and is lying about everything." Olivia's face flushed with anger. "He helped keep me prisoner. He knew what Blackburn was doing." Collins nodded grimly. "We'll take him in for questioning before he stirs up more trouble." As the marshal strode toward the argument, Olivia remained with her horse, anxious to leave this place of painful memories. She scanned the ranch yard one last time, half hoping to catch a glimpse of Xavier among the workers. Instead, her gaze fell on a familiar gray mare in the corral, the horse Xavier had given her for her escape. Someone must have found it after she'd continued on foot following her encounter with Blackburn's search party. A wave of sadness washed over her. The mare had served her well, carrying her toward freedom until they'd been forced to separate. On impulse, Olivia turned to the deputy remaining with her. "That gray mare in the corral, she was mine. At least, she was given to me. Would it be possible?" The deputy smiled kindly. "I'm sure the marshal wouldn't object to you reclaiming your horse, Miss Caldwell. Not after what you've been through." By the time Collins returned, having instructed his men to bring Miller to town, Olivia had retrieved the gray mare. The animal seemed to recognize her, nuzzling her shoulder gently. "Found a friend?" Collins asked, noticing the reunion. "This is the horse Xavier Zimmerman gave me for my escape," Olivia explained. "I had to leave her behind when Blackburn's men were searching for me." The marshal nodded, a knowing look in his eyes. "Take her. She's rightfully yours now." As they rode away from Crook Valley Ranch, Olivia felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. She had survived. She had escaped. And now, with the documents proving her father's true legacy, she had a chance to rebuild her life. Yet as the buildings receded into the distance, she couldn't help looking back one last time, wondering about the cowboy who had risked everything to cut her free. A week passed. The territorial judge arrived in Mill Creek and held a preliminary hearing where Olivia testified about her ordeal. Joseph Blackburn, seated in chains beside his lawyer, glared at her throughout her testimony, but she refused to be intimidated. When she produced the forged loan agreement, comparing it to her father's genuine signature on other documents, murmurs rippled through the crowded courtroom. The judge ordered Blackburn held for trial on charges of kidnapping, assault, forgery, and fraud. Several other former victims came forward with similar stories, emboldened by Olivia's courage. "The territorial prosecutor believes they have a strong case," Martha told Olivia as they walked back to the boarding house after the hearing. "Blackburn will likely spend many years in prison." "What happens to his ranch?" Olivia asked. "The court will decide, but given the evidence of how he acquired much of his property, They'll likely return stolen lands to their rightful owners and auction the rest to pay restitution to his victims. That evening, as Olivia sat on the boarding house porch watching the sunset, Martha joined her with 2 cups of tea. "I've been thinking," Martha said, settling into the chair beside her. "What will you do now, Olivia? Will you return to your father's ranch?" Olivia considered the question. She had been so focused on escaping Blackburn and seeing justice done that she hadn't thought much about her future. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "The ranch needs repairs, and I don't have money for supplies or hands to help run it." Martha nodded thoughtfully. "You're welcome to stay here as long as you need. Emma could use help with the boarding house, and you've already proven yourself capable." "That's very generous," Olivia said, touched by the offer. "I might take you up on it, at least until I decide what to do about the ranch." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "May I ask you something, Martha?" Olivia finally said. "It's about Xavier Zimmerman." "I wondered when you'd bring him up again," Martha replied with a small smile. "You seem to know him, but you've been careful when speaking about him." "Who is he, really?" Martha took a sip of her tea before answering. "Xavier Zimmerman is a man who believes in justice, sometimes more than the law does. Years ago, when land grabbers threatened my brother's farm and the local sheriff was in their pocket, Xavier stepped in. He helped us prove the sheriff's corruption and the land grabbers' illegal activities." "He's not just a cowboy, is he?" Olivia pressed. "No," Martha admitted. "Though he can ride and rope with the best of them. From what I understand, he works sometimes with the territorial government, sometimes on his own, identifying men like Blackburn who use their power to victimize others. So when he took the job at Blackburn's ranch, he was likely already investigating him," Martha confirmed. "Your situation probably accelerated his timeline." Olivia stared into her teacup, processing this revelation. "Do you think he'll come back? To testify against Blackburn, I mean." Martha's expression softened. "I imagine he'll return when his work is done, whatever that may be. Xavier Zimmerman isn't a man who leaves things unfinished." The next morning, Olivia helped serve breakfast to the boarding house guests. She found she enjoyed the routine and the opportunity to interact with travelers passing through Mill Creek. It helped keep her mind occupied, preventing her from constantly wondering about Xavier's whereabouts. As she cleared the dining table after the meal, Emma hurried in from the front parlor. "Olivia, there's someone here to see you." Her heart skipped a beat. "Who is it?" "A man says his name is Zimmerman. He's waiting on the porch." Olivia nearly dropped the stack of plates she was holding. Emma took them from her with a knowing smile. "Go on, I'll finish here." Taking a deep breath to compose herself, Olivia smoothed her skirts and hurried to the front door. She stepped onto the porch, blinking in the bright morning light, and there he was, standing at the railing with his back to her, tall and straight-shouldered. He wore clean clothes now, a dark blue shirt, denim pants, and polished boots. His hat was in his hands, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "Xavier," she said softly. He turned, and the sight of his face, those steady eyes, the strong jawline now clean-shaven, made her breath catch. A small smile curved his lips as he took her in. "Miss Caldwell," he greeted her. "You're looking well." "So are you," she replied, suddenly shy. "Please call me Olivia." "Olivia," he repeated, and somehow her name sounded different in his voice. She moved closer, noticing a fresh cut above his left eyebrow that hadn't been there before. "You're hurt." He touched the wound absently. "It's nothing. A disagreement with one of Blackburn's business partners in Helena." "Is that where you've been?" Xavier nodded. "Following the money. Blackburn wasn't working alone. He had investors funding his land grabs, partners who turned a blind eye to his methods as long as they profited." "And now?" she asked. "Now they're facing their own legal troubles, thanks to documents I was able to acquire." His expression darkened momentarily. Some men value money more than human dignity. They needed to be reminded of the cost. They stood in silence for a moment, the morning breeze stirring the leaves of the oak tree shading the porch. "I heard about the hearing," Xavier finally said. "Martha told me you testified against Blackburn." "Yes, the judge ordered him held for trial." "That was brave," he said softly. "Many would have been too afraid to face him again." Olivia looked up at him, finding sincerity in his gaze. "I had a good example of courage to follow." A slight color touched his cheeks at her words. He cleared his throat. "I also heard you recovered your father's property deeds." "Yes," she confirmed. "The court has recognized them as valid. Once Blackburn's trial concludes, I should be able to reclaim the ranch officially." "Do you plan to return there?" The question hung between them, weighted with unspoken possibilities. "I'm not sure yet," she admitted. "It would be difficult to manage alone, and the buildings need repairs after sitting empty for months." Xavier nodded, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "I've been thinking about settling down somewhere. The work I've been doing, it's important, but it's a solitary life. Lately, I've been wondering if there might be other ways to make a difference." Olivia's heart quickened at his words. "What kind of ways?" "Building something honest, working land that's been rightfully earned." He met her eyes directly. "Perhaps helping someone restore a ranch that was almost lost." The meaning behind his words was unmistakable, and Olivia felt warmth spread through her chest. "That sounds like worthy work," she said softly, "though it might take considerable time." "I'm not in any hurry," he replied, a smile touching his eyes. "The best things are worth waiting for." Olivia found herself smiling back. "Martha mentioned you've known her family for some time." "Yes," he confirmed. "Henry Wilson and I served together during the war. When he and Martha faced trouble afterward, I was able to help. She speaks highly of you." Xavier looked slightly embarrassed by the praise. "The Wilsons are good people. I'm glad they took you in." "They've been very kind," Olivia agreed. "Martha's offered me work here at the boarding house for as long as I need." "And is that what you want?" he asked, his voice gentle. The question made Olivia pause. What did she want? For so long, survival had been her only goal, first after her father's death, then during her captivity, and finally in the uncertain days following her escape. Now, standing before the man who had given her back her freedom, new possibilities were taking shape in her mind. "I want," she began, then found her courage. "I want to reclaim what was taken from me. My father's land, yes, but also the life I was meant to have, one where I make my own choices, build something meaningful." Xavier nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's a good want. And you?" she asked. "What do you want, Xavier Zimmerman?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the varying shades of brown in his eyes, the small scar near his temple. "Peace," he said simply, "and a chance to use my hands for creating rather than fighting." Their gazes held, and in that moment, Olivia felt something shift between them, a recognition of shared desires, of possibilities that hadn't existed before. The front door opened, breaking the moment as Martha appeared. She took in the scene with knowing eyes. "Xavier, you'll stay for dinner, won't you? Henry's been asking after you." "I'd be honored, madam," he replied, his eyes still on Olivia. "Wonderful," Martha said. "Olivia, would you mind showing Xavier to the sitting room while I finish some business with the butcher?" "Of course," Olivia agreed. As Martha disappeared back inside, Xavier offered Olivia his arm. "Shall we?" She placed her hand on his forearm, feeling the strength beneath the fabric of his shirt. Together they entered the boarding house, both aware that something new had begun between them, fragile yet full of promise. like the first green shoot after a long winter. Over the following weeks, Xavier became a frequent visitor at Wilson's boarding house. Most days he would arrive in the late afternoon, sometimes bringing small gifts, wildflowers he'd gathered on the trail, a book of poetry he'd found at the general store, fresh trout he'd caught in the creek. He and Olivia developed a routine of sitting on the front porch after supper, talking as twilight descended over Mill Creek. She learned about his childhood in Pennsylvania, his service in the Union Army during the war, and how he drifted west afterward, unable to settle back into ordinary life. "I saw too much during those years," he confessed one evening. "Men at their worst, but also at their best. It changed how I saw the world." "Is that why you started helping people like the Wilsons, like me?" Olivia asked. Xavier considered this. "Partly. I realized I had skills that could make a difference, tracking, fighting when necessary, understanding how men like Blackburn operate. It seemed wrong not to use those abilities for something worthwhile." In turn, Olivia shared stories of her childhood on the small ranch, her father's dreams of expanding their herd, and her mother's lessons about resilience before illness had claimed her when Olivia was 15. "She always said the true measure of a person isn't what happens to them, but how they respond to it," Olivia recalled, gazing at the setting sun. "I tried to remember that at Blackburn's ranch, even on the worst days." Xavier reached for her hand then, his calloused fingers gentle against hers. "Your mother would be proud of how you've responded." Such moments of connection grew more frequent and more meaningful. A hand offered to help her down from a carriage, a shared glance across the dinner table, the brush of shoulders as they walked side by side through town. Martha observed these developments with quiet satisfaction, occasionally sharing knowing smiles with her brother when Xavier lingered later than usual, or when Olivia hummed to herself while working. One morning, as Joseph Blackburn's trial date approached, Marshal Collins arrived at the boarding house with news. "Miss Caldwell," he said, removing his hat as he entered the parlor where Olivia was arranging flowers. "I've received word from the territorial court. They've cleared all legal obstacles regarding your father's property. You're free to return to your ranch whenever you wish." Joy flooded through her at his words. "Truly, even before Blackburn's trial concludes?" "Yes, madam. The evidence of forgery was so clear, and with Mr. Zimmerman's additional documentation of Blackburn's schemes, the judge saw no reason to delay restoring your property rights." Olivia thanked the marshal, her mind already racing ahead to what this meant. Her ranch truly hers again. The place where she'd grown up, where her parents were buried on the small hill overlooking the house. When Xavier arrived that afternoon, she rushed to meet him, sharing the news as soon as he stepped onto the porch, his face lit up with her excitement. "That's wonderful, Olivia. Have you decided when you'll go back?" "I'd like to see it soon," she admitted, "though I know it will need work before it's properly habitable again." Xavier seemed to make a decision. "I'd be happy to ride out with you tomorrow if you'd like. We could assess what needs to be done." The next day dawned clear and bright as Xavier and Olivia rode east from Mill Creek. The journey to her family's property took several hours, giving them time to talk about practical matters, what supplies they might need, which repairs would be most urgent, how to prepare for the coming fall and winter. Beneath their practical discussion ran a current of something deeper: shared plans, mutual consideration, the natural way they spoke of future actions as "we" rather than "I." When they crested the final rise and the Caldwell Ranch came into view, Olivia reined her mare to a stop, overcome with emotion. The place looked smaller than she remembered, and neglect had clearly taken its toll. The corral fence had partially collapsed, The barn door hung askew, and weeds had overtaken her mother's garden, yet it was still home, the only real home she'd ever known. "It's still standing," she said softly. "I was afraid." "It's a good structure," Xavier assessed, surveying the small ranch house. "Solid foundation. The roof looks intact. With some work it could be comfortable before winter sets in." They rode down to the house, dismounting in what had once been a tidy yard. Olivia approached the front door with trepidation, finding it unlocked. Inside, dust covered everything, but otherwise the house was much as she had left it, her father's chair by the fireplace, her mother's dishes in the cupboard, the small bookshelf with its modest collection of volumes. Xavier followed her in, respectfully removing his hat as he crossed the threshold. He watched as Olivia moved through the rooms, trailing her fingers over familiar objects, reconnecting with her past. "The stove seems in working order," he noted in the kitchen. "And the pump at the sink just needs priming. The bedroom needs airing out," Olivia added, returning from the back of the house. "And there are some roof leaks in the storage room, but nothing too serious." They continued their inspection, moving from the house to the barn and outbuildings. Despite the neglect, the buildings were fundamentally sound. The land itself, roughly 80 acres of good pasture with a creek running through it, remained fertile and well situated. As the afternoon waned, they sat on the front porch steps, sharing a simple meal of bread, cheese, and dried apples that Martha had packed for them. "What do you think?" Xavier asked. "Is it what you remembered?" "Smaller," Olivia admitted with a small laugh. "But better than I feared. It feels—" She searched for the right word. "It feels possible again." Xavier nodded, understanding her meaning. "With a week of solid work, you could move back in. I could help with the heaviest repairs, the barn door, the corral fencing, patching the roof." "I'd be grateful," Olivia said. "Though I hate to take you away from your other work." He was quiet for a moment, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I've been thinking about that. I spoke with Marshal Collins last week. The territorial governor is looking to appoint deputy marshals in this region, men who know the area, who understand the challenges local ranchers face." Olivia looked at him with surprise. "You're considering becoming a lawman?" "It would be a way to continue the work I believe in, but with the authority of the law behind me." He met her eyes. "And it would mean staying in one place, putting down roots." The implication hung in the air between them. "Where would you live?" she asked softly. "That depends," he answered, his voice equally soft. "On what?" Xavier set aside his plate and turned to face her fully. "On whether I'd be welcome near here. This is good land. A man could build a life on it." Olivia's heart quickened. "It would take more than one person to run this ranch properly." "Yes," he agreed. "It would." Their eyes held, the moment stretching between them, filled with unspoken hopes. "Olivia," Xavier finally said, "I know we haven't known each other long, not in the ordinary way of things. But I hope we understand each other in ways that matter." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "When I cut those ropes from your wrists," he continued, "I didn't know I was cutting myself free too. Free from a life of wandering, of never truly belonging anywhere." He reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "I'm not a man of many words, but I want you to know that whatever you decide about this place, about your future, I'd like to be part of it. If you'll have me." Olivia looked at their joined hands, then up at his face, the face of the man who had risked everything to help a woman he barely knew, who had shown her kindness when she'd forgotten such a thing existed, who now offered her a partnership she had never dared to imagine. "I think," she said carefully, "that this ranch was always meant for a family. My parents built it that way. It would be a shame for it to be anything less." Hope kindled in Xavier's eyes. "And what kind of family do you envision, Olivia Caldwell?" She smiled then, all the uncertainty of recent months giving way to a new certainty, one that begins with us. Xavier's expression transformed, joy breaking across his features like sunrise over the mountains. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that held both tenderness and promise. When they parted, Olivia felt as though something had shifted inside her, the final healing of a wound she hadn't realized was still open. "We should head back to town before dark," Xavier said reluctantly. "But I'll return tomorrow with tools and supplies. We can begin making this place a home again." As they rode back to Mill Creek in the golden light of late afternoon, Olivia felt a profound sense of rightness. Her journey had been difficult, marked by loss, cruelty, and fear, but it had led her here, to this moment, to this man riding beside her. She thought of her mother's words about the true measure of a person being how they respond to what happens to them. Her response would be to build something new from the ashes of what had been taken, to create a life defined not by what she had survived, but by what she would create. And she would not do it alone. In the weeks that followed, Xavier proved true to his word. Each morning he would arrive at the boarding house with his wagon loaded with supplies, lumber, nails, tools, and whatever else was needed for that day's work at the ranch. Olivia would join him, and together they would spend the day repairing, cleaning, and restoring her family home. Other helpers joined them occasionally: Henry Wilson and his son, Emma from the boarding house, even Marshall Collins for an afternoon of fence mending. By mid-August, the ranch house was habitable again. The roof no longer leaked, the windows had been repaired, the floors scrubbed, and fresh paint applied to the exterior. In the barn, Xavier had rebuilt stalls for horses and constructed new feed bins. The corral fencing stood strong once more, ready to contain the small herd of cattle Xavier had helped Olivia purchase from a neighboring rancher. As summer began its slow transition to fall, Olivia prepared to move back to her ranch permanently. Her last evening at Wilson's boarding house was marked by a special dinner Martha arranged in her honor. "We'll miss having you here," Martha said as they enjoyed apple pie at the conclusion of the meal. "But I'm happy to see you returning to your land. Your father would be proud." "You'll all visit often, I hope," Olivia replied, looking around at the faces that had become dear to her: Martha, Henry, Emma, and of course Xavier. "Wild horses couldn't keep us away," Henry assured her with a wink at Xavier. "Especially once you two make it official." Olivia blushed, though the idea of marriage had been increasingly present in her conversations with Xavier. They had agreed to move slowly, to be certain, but both knew where their hearts were leading them. Later that evening, Xavier walked with Olivia in the boarding house garden, the air fragrant with late summer blooms. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" he asked. "About being at the ranch alone?" "A little," she admitted. "It will be strange at first, but it's time. And you'll be nearby in town." Xavier nodded, though a shadow crossed his face. "I received word today. Joseph Blackburn's trial has been scheduled for next month in Helena." Olivia tensed at the name. "Will I need to testify again?" "Yes. The prosecutor believes your testimony will be crucial." He squeezed her hand. "I'll be there with you. You won't face him alone." "Thank you," she said softly. Then, gathering her courage, "After the trial, after it's truly finished." "Yes," Xavier prompted when she hesitated. Olivia looked up at him, the man who had become the center of her world. "After it's finished, I think we should discuss our future more definitely. I don't want to wait forever, Xavier." His eyes warmed with understanding and something deeper. "Nor do I. Once Blackburn is sentenced and you're truly free of him, we'll make plans. I promise." The next morning, Xavier drove Olivia to her ranch in his wagon, loaded with the last of her belongings and supplies for the coming weeks. The September air was crisp with early autumn, the countryside ablaze with goldenrod and the first turning leaves. As they approached the ranch, Olivia felt a surge of pride at the transformation. What had been neglected and forlorn just weeks ago now looked cared for again, the house freshly painted, smoke curling from the chimney where Emma had started a fire before returning to town, the corral containing 4 horses including Olivia's gray mare. Inside, the house was warm and welcoming. Curtains that Martha had helped Olivia sew hung at the windows, and a Dutch oven simmered on the stove with a stew for her supper. "Home," Olivia said softly as she stood in the center of the main room. "Home," Xavier agreed, setting down the last of her trunks. He didn't linger long, conscious of propriety now that Olivia would be living alone at the ranch. They had agreed he would visit daily but return to his rented room in town each evening, at least until after their planned wedding. "I'll ride out first thing tomorrow," he promised as he prepared to leave. "We can start on the north pasture fence." Olivia walked him to his wagon, suddenly reluctant to see him go. "Xavier," she said, catching his hand, "thank you for everything." He turned to her, his expression tender. "You don't need to thank me, Olivia. Everything I've done has been because he paused, then continued with quiet certainty, because I love you." It was the first time he had said the words, though they had been implicit in his actions for weeks. Hearing them spoken aloud made Olivia's heart soar. "I love you too," she replied, the words coming easily, naturally. Xavier's smile was radiant as he bent to kiss her, a kiss filled with promise and future mornings waking in the same house, future evenings by the same fire. That night, alone in her childhood home, Olivia slept more peacefully than she had in months. The weeks leading up to Blackburn's trial passed in a rhythm of work and planning. Each day brought Xavier to the ranch, where they labored side by side preparing for winter, stocking the root cellar, repairing outbuildings, ensuring the livestock had adequate shelter. In the evenings before Xavier returned to town, they would sit together on the porch or by the fire, discussing their hopes for the future. They decided to marry in the spring, after the worst of winter had passed. Xavier would continue pursuing the deputy marshal position while helping Olivia run the ranch. Eventually, they hoped to expand their herd and possibly their family as well. 3 days before they were scheduled to travel to Helena for Blackburn's trial, Xavier arrived at the ranch looking troubled. Olivia was in the kitchen baking bread, but she immediately sensed his unease. "What's wrong?" she asked as he hung his hat on the peg by the door. Xavier sat heavily at the table, running a hand through his hair. "I just came from town. There was a telegram from Marshal Collins. He's already in Helena for pre-trial matters." "And," Olivia prompted when he hesitated, "there was an incident during prisoner transfer. Blackburn attacked one of the guards and tried to escape." Olivia's hands stilled in the dough. "Did he succeed?" "No," Xavier assured her quickly. "They subdued him, but he was injured in the struggle, badly injured. They're not sure if he'll survive to stand trial." Olivia absorbed this information, unsure how to feel. Part of her wanted to see Blackburn face justice in a courtroom, to watch as he was sentenced for his crimes. Another part would be relieved to never have to see his face again. "What does this mean for us?" "For the trip to Helena, Collins says to proceed as planned for now. If Blackburn's condition changes, he'll send word." Xavier reached across the table to take her flour-dusted hands. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she said after a moment. "I think so. It's just strange to think he might die before facing judgment for what he did." "He'll face judgment one way or another," Xavier said quietly. "If not from the territorial court, then from a higher authority." They departed for Helena 3 days later, traveling by stagecoach along with Martha, who had been called as a witness regarding Olivia's condition when she first arrived in Mill Creek. The journey took 2 full days, with an overnight stay at a wayside inn. Upon their arrival in the territorial capital, they checked into a modest hotel near the courthouse. Marshal Collins met them there with news. "Blackburn is recovering," he informed them. "The trial will proceed as scheduled the day after tomorrow." Olivia nodded, feeling both relieved and apprehensive. Xavier squeezed her hand supportively. "He'll be heavily guarded," Collins continued, seeing her worry. "And I've arranged for you to have a private waiting room at the courthouse, so you won't have to encounter him except during your testimony." The trial began on a clear October morning. The courthouse was crowded with spectators, some merely curious, others former victims of Blackburn's schemes hoping to see justice served. Olivia sat between Xavier and Martha in the witness waiting room, her hands clenched tightly in her lap as they listened to the opening statements through the partially open door. When she was finally called to testify, Xavier walked with her to the courtroom entrance. "Remember," he said softly, "you've already won. Whatever happens in there, he can't hurt you anymore." Olivia nodded, drawing strength from his steady presence. Then she straightened her shoulders and entered the courtroom. Joseph Blackburn sat at the defense table, his face leaner than she remembered, with a new scar along his jaw from his escape attempt. As she passed, his eyes locked onto hers with the same cold hatred she remembered from her captivity. But this time, Olivia did not look away. She met his gaze steadily until he was the one to break contact. Her testimony was clear and unwavering. She described her father's death, Blackburn's false claims of debt, her captivity, and her escape with Xavier's help. When questioned about the forged documents, she identified them confidently, pointing out the discrepancies in her father's supposed signature. The defense attorney's attempts to discredit her fell flat against her composed responses. By the time she was excused from the witness stand, the mood in the courtroom had shifted palpably against Blackburn. Outside in the corridor, Xavier was waiting. "You were magnificent," he told her, pride evident in his voice. The trial continued for 3 more days. Xavier testified about what he had found at Blackburn's ranch and the documents he had gathered from Blackburn's business partners in Helena. Martha spoke of Olivia's condition upon arriving in Mill Creek. Other witnesses came forward with similar stories of intimidation, forged documents, and threats. On the 4th day, the jury returned with their verdict, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Joseph Blackburn to 20 years in the territorial prison. As the bailiffs led Blackburn away, he turned toward where Olivia sat with Xavier. "This isn't finished," he spat. "You think you're safe, girl. You think the rest of his threat was cut off as the bailiffs roughly removed him from the courtroom." Xavier's arm tightened protectively around Olivia's shoulders. "It's over," he assured her. "He can't hurt anyone anymore." That evening they celebrated with Martha, Marshal Collins, and several others who had helped build the case against Blackburn. The mood was one of relief and vindication, though Olivia remained quieter than the others, processing the day's events. Later, as Xavier walked her back to her hotel room, she finally gave voice to her thoughts. "I should feel triumphant, shouldn't I? He's going to prison for a very long time." Xavier considered her question carefully. "There's no should about how you feel, Olivia. What you went through, it leaves marks that don't disappear just because justice is served." She nodded, grateful for his understanding. "When he made that threat in the courtroom, for a moment I was back there tied to that post, afraid." "That's natural," Xavier said. "But remember this, you're not alone anymore. Whatever comes, we face it together." Outside her hotel room door, he took both her hands in his. "Try to rest. Tomorrow we head home. Home." The word filled her with warmth despite the lingering shadows of the day. "I love you, Xavier," she whispered. He kissed her gently. "And I love you, now and always." The journey back to Montana territory seemed shorter somehow, perhaps because a weight had been lifted from their shoulders. As the stagecoach carried them westward, Olivia found herself looking forward rather than back, planning the future she and Xavier would build together. Winter arrived early that year, blanketing the countryside in snow by early November. Xavier, having secured the deputy marshal position, divided his time between his official duties and helping at the ranch. As the weather worsened, he took to staying overnight more frequently, sleeping in the small room off the kitchen that had once been her father's study. Their wedding was planned for April, when the worst of winter would be past and travel easier for their friends. In the meantime, they settled into a comfortable routine, working side by side during the day and spending evenings planning their shared future. One snowy evening in late December, as they sat before the fire after supper, Xavier seemed unusually pensive. "What are you thinking about?" Olivia asked. Setting aside her mending, he smiled, reaching to take her hand. "About last Christmas. I was working on a ranch in Wyoming, sleeping in a bunkhouse with 15 other men, wondering if I'd ever find a place that felt like home. And now," she prompted. "Now I know I have," he said simply. "Not just this place, though it's becoming dear to me, but you, Olivia, you're my home." She moved to sit beside him on the sofa, resting her head against his shoulder. "You're mine, too." Outside, snow continued to fall, creating a peaceful hush across the landscape. Inside, the fire crackled warmly, casting a golden glow over the room, a room that had once belonged to Olivia's parents, now transformed by new love and new beginnings. "I have something for you," Xavier said after a while. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I was going to wait until Christmas morning, but—" Olivia took the box with trembling fingers. Inside lay a ring, a simple gold band set with a small but brilliant diamond. "It was my mother's," Xavier explained. "I've carried it with me all these years, waiting for the right person to give it to. I know we're already engaged, but I wanted you to have this, a proper symbol of my promise to you." Tears filled Olivia's eyes as she slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "I'll treasure it always." As winter deepened, their bond grew stronger. Xavier officially moved his few belongings to the ranch in January, though they maintained separate bedrooms out of respect for tradition until their wedding. Together they weathered blizzards, cared for their small herd, and prepared for spring planting. Word arrived from Helena in February that Joseph Blackburn had been transferred to a federal prison in the East, removing him even further from their lives. The news brought Olivia a sense of closure, allowing her to truly look forward without the shadow of his threats. By March, the snow began to recede, revealing the first green shoots of new grass. The preparations for their wedding intensified as the date approached. Martha and Emma traveled from Mill Creek to help Olivia with her dress, a simple but elegant creation of cream-colored silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. "You look beautiful," Martha declared as Olivia tried on the completed gown. "Xavier won't know what hit him." Olivia blushed, smoothing the fabric with reverent hands. "I never thought I'd have this," she admitted. "After everything with Blackburn, I wasn't sure I could trust anyone again." "But you found someone worthy of trust," Martha said softly. "Someone who sees your strength and your heart." "Yes," Olivia agreed. "I did." April 12, 1879 dawned clear and mild, perfect weather for a wedding. The ceremony was held on the ranch, beneath an arch Xavier had constructed near the spot where Olivia's parents were buried. He had surrounded the graves with a white picket fence and planted early spring flowers, his way of honoring those who should have been present. Guests arrived throughout the morning: the Wilsons, Marshall Collins, neighbors from surrounding ranches, and townsfolk from Mill Creek who had come to know and respect the couple. A minister from town stood ready beneath the arch, his Bible open in his hands. At noon, Olivia emerged from the house on Henry Wilson's arm, wearing her cream silk dress and carrying a bouquet of wildflowers. Xavier waited for her beneath the arch, tall and handsome in a new black suit, his eyes never leaving her as she walked toward him. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. They exchanged traditional vows, their voices clear and certain in the spring air. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Xavier kissed Olivia with a tenderness that brought tears to more than one observer's eyes. The celebration continued well into the evening, with food, music, and dancing in the barn that Xavier had cleared and decorated for the occasion. As twilight fell, lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the festivities. "Are you happy, Mrs. Zimmerman?" Xavier asked as they swayed together to a fiddle's slow melody. Olivia looked up at him, her husband, her partner, her savior in more ways than he would ever know. "Completely," she answered. "Are you?" His smile was all the answer she needed, but he gave her words as well. "More than I ever thought possible." Later that night, after the guests had departed and they were finally alone, Xavier carried Olivia across the threshold of their home, truly theirs now, filled with both memories of her past and promises of their future. In the bedroom they would now share, with moonlight spilling through the curtains and the sounds of night creatures creating a gentle symphony outside. They came together as husband and wife. Xavier's touches were tender, reverent, each caress healing something within Olivia that had been wounded by cruelty and fear. In his arms, she found not just passion but completion, the final closing of a circle that had begun that day in a dusty stable, when a quiet cowboy had cut the ropes from her wrists and led her into freedom. 5 years later, the summer sun beat down on Olivia as she hung laundry on the line behind the ranch house, which had expanded considerably over the years. A new wing had been added to accommodate their growing family, and the barn had been rebuilt to house a larger herd of cattle and horses. From the corral came the sound of Xavier's voice as he instructed their 4-year-old son, James Henry Zimmerman, on the finer points of brushing a pony. "Gentle strokes, Jamie," Xavier was saying. "That's it. Daisy likes when you're gentle with her." Olivia smiled as she pinned a small dress to the line. Their daughter, Sarah Martha, not quite 2, was napping inside, watched over by Emma Wilson, who had married William the previous year and occasionally helped at the ranch. So much had changed in 5 years. The Zimmerman Ranch, as it was now known, had prospered under their joint care. Xavier's position as deputy marshal had expanded to include responsibility for a wider territory, though he managed to balance his duties with ranch work and family life. Joseph Blackburn was a distant memory now, his name rarely mentioned. They had learned of his death in prison 3 years earlier, an event that had brought Olivia neither joy nor sorrow, merely a quiet sense that a chapter had truly closed. Finishing with the laundry, Olivia shielded her eyes against the sun to watch her husband and son. Xavier knelt beside Jamie, his patient hands guiding the boy's smaller ones as they brushed the pony's mane. His dark hair, now streaked with the occasional silver strand, caught the sunlight as he turned to say something that made Jamie laugh. Love swelled within her love for this man who had restored her faith in humanity, who had built a life with her based on mutual respect and shared dreams, who approached fatherhood with the same quiet competence he brought to everything. As if sensing her thoughts, Xavier looked up, catching her gaze across the yard. The smile he gave her, warm, intimate, filled with shared history, still had the power to make her heart skip a beat. "Mama," Jamie called, noticing her watching them. "Come see. I'm brushing Daisy all by myself." Olivia crossed the yard to join her family, accepting Xavier's kiss when she reached them. His free arms slipped around her waist, pulling her close against his side where she fit perfectly. "You're doing a fine job, Jamie," she praised her son, whose dark hair and serious expression mimicked his father's. "Daisy looks very happy." "Papa says someday I can ride her all the way to town," Jamie announced proudly. "Someday," Xavier agreed with a wink at Olivia. "When you're a bit bigger." A soft cry from the house announced that Sarah had awakened from her nap. "I'll go," Olivia said, pressing another quick kiss to Xavier's cheek before heading inside. Emma met her at the door, the sleepy-eyed toddler in her arms. "Someone's asking for her mama," she said, transferring Sarah to Olivia. "Thank you for watching her," Olivia said as her daughter's warm weight settled against her. "Will you and William stay for supper? Xavier brought fresh trout from the stream this morning." "We'd love to," Emma accepted. "William's helping Henry with some business in town, but they should be finished by supper time." As Emma departed to complete her own errands, Olivia carried Sarah to the porch, settling in the rocking chair Xavier had built when she was expecting Jamie. The little girl, still drowsy, rested her head on Olivia's shoulder, one small hand playing with the locket that had been her grandmother's. From this vantage point, Olivia could see the entire front of their property, the expanded corral where Xavier and Jamie now led Daisy in a circle. The neat fencing Xavier had insisted on building himself. The arch where they had been married, now covered in climbing roses. Beyond, the pastures stretched green and lush, dotted with the cattle that provided their livelihood. The creek where they had picnicked just last week meandered through the eastern section of their land, eventually joining the larger river that marked their boundary. It wasn't a grand estate by any means, but it was theirs, built with their hands, sustained by their work, filled with their love. Sarah stirred against her, blue eyes blinking up sleepily. "Mama," she murmured, a smile lighting her face, a smile so like Xavier's that it made Olivia's heart squeeze with joy. "Yes, my love," Olivia whispered, pressing a kiss to her daughter's forehead. "Mama's here. We're all here together." As the afternoon sun began its slow descent toward the western hills, Xavier and Jamie joined them on the porch, Jamie proudly recounting his accomplishments with the pony. Xavier sat on the step near Olivia's chair, his shoulder brushing against her knee, the four of them together in the golden light. Olivia thought back to that day in Blackburn's stable, the day when everything had changed, when a stranger's kindness had opened the door to a future she couldn't have imagined. The road from there to here had not always been easy, but every step had been worthwhile. She had been trapped by cruelty, but love had set her free. And in that freedom, she had found everything she'd ever wanted.